When inducing and placing workers, you may be involved in reviewing the resume of the personnel folder to prepare for the new worker. If you're in a large system such as mine, you may look at an application, look at a resume, and then if the employees are already in the system, for example, connected to a detention center that is one of the many departments that exist within your organization, you might look at that individual's personnel folder to prepare for that worker. If the person's not an internal candidate, then you may look at other variables, just solely the resume. Locating the new worker physically, socially, and organizationally in the agency means how would this person fit in terms of what unit or where that person would be. In my organization, in my department, for example, we have 7 supervisory units spread throughout the county. I'm sorry, 6 supervisory units spread throughout the county. We did have 7. We just recently restructured and consolidated one of the units because of budget issues. But to make a long story short, when you're placing that worker, you need to know where that individual would fit within your organization. You might be the person that might meet that individual on the first day of employment before they go to HR in terms of what they're going to be doing. You may be introducing the worker to staff and other individuals, and then other kinds of tasks that you might do for that worker may include getting ready for the supplies and seeing what that individual will need and where the desk will be located, or if you're hiring multiple staff, where those desks may be located for that particular individual. Work planning. The task at hand with respect to work planning involves the supervisor planning what the agency needs the new worker to do. How cases will be distributed, what needs to be done, will you assign new cases right away, or will you wait and ease that worker into new cases later on? Who gets the work done, work out, and how does that work put the job description, to work, and how are you going to be planning the distribution of that work? Will you ease the worker in right away? Will you give them an existing caseload that another worker had? Would you begin them with fresh cases in that process? What does long-range planning as well as immediate and short-range planning mean? Okay, and how would that work? In that particular process. Work assignments, you need to be able to understand as the supervisor what criteria in terms of how you would distribute that work. What might be the strengths and weaknesses of each of your staff in terms of what kinds of cases you might assign to different individuals. This may be a worker that, this may be the type of case that I need to have somebody who's bilingual. Or this is the type of case that perhaps, even if it's a girl case, that might work better, or a female case that might work better with a male worker, or vice versa, depending upon those individual needs. Or this is the kind of worker that has strengths or weaknesses, and this is not the type of case that I would assign to this particular individual. How would I equalize my distribution of cases? Do I give every other case to individuals, or do I give a case based on geographic areas? Some of my staff, for example, design cases and give cases to staff within specific geographic areas. As I've indicated, I have 6 units. I have 4 units on the east side of the county and 2 units on the other side of the county. And some supervisors just rotate assignments. Some supervisors assign individuals in specific geographic areas within the county, within that particular unit, and then they have backup staff to equalize some of the cases. So you need to be able to determine what works best for that particular area as a supervisor. Your task variety in terms of the differences of the cases, and you might assign cases based on workers' interests. In other words, some workers prefer working with girls as opposed to boys, or some workers may have some sex offenders. Some workers may want to be working with kids that have drug cases. All right, and you try to match the worker with the client. You give work assignments according to procedures, and make sure that you identify problems that may occur, in these work assignments. Work delegation focuses on how the work is to be accomplished. In other words, how much autonomy will be granted to the worker. When you have a new worker, a new staff person, you may be a little bit more controlling, you may be spending more time with an individual, you may provide them more supervision, whereas if you have a more seasoned worker, you may spend less time and you may allow that individual to be more autonomous with respect to that particular, with the style of supervision that individual may need. I will say this, however, there is no substitute for weekly structured supervision. It just means that with the newer worker, you may spend more time in that structured time and more focus as compared to the more seasoned worker. Now, you may not have weekly supervisory experiences with the more seasoned worker. You might see them every other week. There may be less informal walk-ins with that particular individual. The analysis and the planning of client context is important with respect to work delegation. In other words, do you give low-risk assignments to one particular worker only? Do you give them a blend of low and medium and high risk, or do you have a specialty unit that focuses primarily on high risk? And well, we've already talked about the amount of worker discretion that you might give individuals. Monitoring, reviewing, and evaluating the work is very, very important. Two key words. As a supervisor, you must set expectations, and if you don't set expectations, then you have nothing to inspect. So think in terms of expectations and inspection. Determining whether the work is done on time, the way the agency wants it, demonstrating concern for your workers that may need time off, sick leave, vacation schedules, and how you make those particular assignments with workers in terms of what needs to be done. Making sure that your caseloads are covered. If a person is out on a family medical leave or for paternity reasons or what have you, how are you going to distribute the work? Will you reassign cases? Will you at least determine which cases may need to have some constant coverage versus those that may not have constant coverage? And reviewing assignments to ensure that completion is done according to policies and procedures. If you have low, medium, high-risk contact standards, making sure that those contact standards are important is very, very important for you as a supervisor. Otherwise, your staff will not take it seriously. Coordinating work. How do you put the pieces of the total work together? How do you ensure that your work is integrated, with respect to other units? If you have an MST unit, you make referrals to an MST, multi-systemic therapy unit, or if you have other kinds of units that work together that do assessments, or if you're working with community agencies, collateral systems, how do you coordinate all these activities? How do you gain support, from your human and physical resources that are required to do the job, making sure that your staff have adequate supplies, have the adequate tools necessary and resources necessary to perform the job that's done. Organizing and orchestrating activities with a number of different workers is very important. In my system, for example, we bifurcate functions between investigating probation officers and supervising probation officers, making sure that you have the material from your investigating supervisor to your supervising probation officers, so that they have the record, they have the risk assessment, they have everything that's necessary for them to do in performing that particular work. And it also involves resolving conflicts within the unit or what happens outside the unit. You as the supervisor need to be prepared to resolve any kinds of conflicts in working with individuals. That's part of the coordination function.